Today's Tanya for the 30th of Av, Chedesh Elul, is in the Geras HaKedesh on Ptaf Kuf Yud Daled Amud Aleph, and the number at the bottom of the page is 438. We're approximately in the middle of the page. The Alter Rebbe says that the tzedakah should be given not only from the money that is left over after you've supported your family and you have leftover money, then you give tzedakah. But that right from the beginning, the intention of making a living in the first place should be l'shem shamayim. It should be so that you can give tzedakah, and to give tzedakah to every Jew who is a part of God, every Jewish neshama. Only among those Jewish neshamas whom you are committed to providing for and taking care of, the Torah says that your wife and children come first. Al kain ahu vayachai. Therefore, my beloved brothers, the Rebbe writes, Simu no levavchem le'ela hadvarim. Pay attention, take to heart these things that were mentioned. Biktsara ma'ed, although it was very brief. V'mirta Hashem, ponim el ponim adaber bam ba'arucha. When we meet face to face, we will speak of this more at length. And that is, Eichiyes kol iker avedas Hashem b'itim halolu, how in these days, the main service of God, the main aveda b'ikves Mashiach, in this time of the coming of Mashiach, he avedas hatzedakah. The main aveda is the giving of tzedakah. Kameshikosov is Amr Rizal, as the sages say, in Yisrael Negolin ela b'tzedakah, that the geula comes through the preparation of tzedakah. V'lei Amr Rizal Talmud Torah shokul keneged gemilas chasadim, and that which it says that Talmud Torah is equal and greater than all the mitzvahs, including gemilas chasadim, that was said only ela b'yameihem. That was true in their days. Talmud Torah haya ikir ha'aveda etzlam. In their days, the main aveda was the study of Torah. And that's why in those days there were so many chachamim, such great chachamim, Tanoim and Amoraim, because it was a time of the knowledge of Torah, and therefore in their days the main aveda was the study of Torah. But in our days, in the times before Mashiach, Shenof was Sukkos David, ad bechinas raglayim va'akvayim. It is called Ikves Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach, because Sukkos David, meaning the attribute of Malchus, David being Melech Yisrael, the attribute of Malchus has fallen down to the heels, Shehi bechinas Asiya, which means into the world of Asiya, the world of action. Therefore, Ein derech ledavka ba be'emes. There is no other way to cleave to God today. And to transform the darkness into its light, or another version is delay. Ki'im bebechinas asiya, other than through action. Gamkein shehimaisa hatzdaka, since the attribute of Malchus has fallen into the level of asiya, therefore the only way to cleave to God properly is also through asiya, through action. In other words, through the act of the mitzvah. Shehi ma'isa hatzdaka ki yadua l'maskilim. And of all the acts, of all the mitzvahs that one can perform, the mitzvah of tzedakah is called action, is the primary action, as is known to those who study Kabbalah. Shebechinas asiya belikus, that what is the element of action within God, he bechinas hashpoas v'hamshachas hachayis lemata mata, because there are those expressions of God that are described as speech. God said, "Let there be light." There are those things that are described as God's thought, like Neshamas Yisrael olu b'machshava. What is the element of action in God? What is called God's action? When God gives life to the lowest level of the physical world, that's called God's doings. So action in God means giving to the lowly. Leman de Leslie Migarme Klum, to those levels that have no godliness of their own at all, have no holiness at all, and therefore, when a person gives tzedakah, also giving to the one below him, to the one who is poorer than him, he is thereby doing the act of the mitzvah, the act of godliness, which is also giving to the lowly. So, kol haziveiches yitzeh bazeh, everyone who subdues his yetzer hara, upeseyach yodei, and he opens his hand ulavave in his heart in giving tzedakah, iskaf yisitra achra, he subdues the unholiness, umahapich hasheicha le'er Hashem yizbarech, and he transforms the darkness to the light of godliness, hasheichen oleinu, bebechinas asiyah, who comes to us and reveals himself to us in the state of action, on the level of asiyah, bi'ikvis Mashiach, in this generation of the heels of Mashiach, v'yizike lireis ayin ba'ayin b'shuv Hashem tziyin, etc. And we will merit to see eye to eye with our own eyes when the Eibishter comes back, brings us back, and comes back himself to Eretz Yisrael. Today's Hayom Yom, for the 30th of Av, Rosh Chodesh Elul, the Rebbe writes that we start saying L'David Hashem Eiri, and the custom is by the Rabbeim that in the course of the day one practices blowing the shofar, and then we begin blowing the shofar after davening on the second day of Rosh Chodesh. In the body of the text, the Rebbe writes that the Alter Rebbe, in the beginning, when he first became a Rebbe, used to say very brief Maimarim, very short Maimarim, as for example the Maimar that begins Zecher Av Tuvcha, and its explanation, which the Alter Rebbe also wrote, which appears in the Siddur, was said in 6 installations, and it was somewhat longer than the one that is printed.